Let's have a look at the upper leg and talk about the skeletal muscular structure and some tips for drawing it. The longest bone in your body is your femur, and the great trochanter of the femur at the top of the femur here on the left is the midway point between the top of your head and your bottom of your feet. So we also have the patella or the kneecap. So here's an overview of the muscles of the upper leg from the front and back. This is from the Richer book, and you see there's a band of Richer there, Richer's band. That's an impressive achievement to have an anatomical landmark named after you, because it's much more finite than, say, the star registry, where everyone could go get them and all their friends' names, have stars named after them. The first muscle I want to talk to you about is the sartorius, which is this muscle I highlighted with red. So sartor is Latin for tailor, and they would call it the inseam muscle. So it goes from the front of your pelvis down around to the inside of your tibia. And you see it has a spiral form, and like all spiral form muscles, it have to do with rotation. So if you tighten the origin on the pelvis and the insertion on the tibia, what you get is rotation, where it would rotate the knee outwards or the foot outwards. This is the muscle you use to turn out your foot if you were ever in dance. And again, sartor meant tailor in Latin. And if you talk about someone sartorially, you're usually talking about the way that they're dressed. So it's sort of like an inseam muscle, is why they call it sartorius. And its origin up at the top of your pelvis, along with the muscle next to it, which is the tensor fascia lata, which we talked about with the pelvis, that is to the left of it here, form sort of a chevron, or like an upward pointing arrow at the top of the quadriceps, which are the main muscles on the front of the leg, and I want to talk about those next. So we'll start with the biggest one, and its name in Latin just means big outside, which is your vastus lateralis. So here's the vastus lateralis highlighted in red, and we'll take a look. Actually, here's the main quadriceps: vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and rectus femoris. But we were talking about the vastus lateralis, so we're panning over to the left to take a closer look at it. And you can see that it goes from your femur down through. There's two spots that say I on this. There's a little line over the kneecap with the letter I there. So that is where the vastus lateralis goes to the patellar ligament and ultimately to the front of your tibia, that little red underneath the second eye. So that's really the insertion of not just this, but all of your quadriceps go ultimately to the front of your tibia. So your vastus lateralis, big outside, much larger part of the origin on the back of the femur, as you see here. So the vastus lateralis goes from femur to tibia and helps you straighten your leg. Now, the next one we'll look at is the vastus medialis, which again, the name just says where it is. Basically, it's your big inside muscle. Vastus is large, medialis means the inside. And if we look at the origin, the O there, it's also largely on the back of the femur, and again it goes above the kneecap into patellar ligament and ultimately attaches there to the front of the tibia. So if you contract that, it also helps you straighten your leg. And for the sake of drawing, your vastus medialis, is a lower, steeper curve. So the curve on the inside of the leg lower, curve on the outside higher. The next muscle I want to look at is the middle quadricep. Your middle quadricep is called your rectus femoris. So rectus is the word for straight, and femoris is the word for femur. So it's the muscle that goes straight along your femur, and we see it originates up there on the pelvis and inserts through the patellar ligament, just like the other two quadriceps we talked about, ultimately to the tibia. And if we contract those 2 points, what it does is help us raise our leg up to the front. So these three quadriceps are the main muscles that affect surface form on the front of the upper leg. So now let's go from the front of the leg. Here's the quadriceps and sartorius and tensor fascia lata, and go look at the back of the leg. So we see the glutes are the largest muscle, which we talked about with the pelvis. We have adductors. What I really want to talk about are the hamstrings, the semitendinosus and your biceps femoris. So first, your semitendinosus, which goes from your pelvis to your tibia, and it helps you do the opposite of what your quadriceps do in terms of movement, which is to raise your leg to the back. So your other hamstring is your biceps femoris. And like the biceps of your arm, you have an OBFL, which is origin biceps femoris long, and OBFS, origin biceps femoris short, and they originate there and go to your fibula, or your kind of outside bone there below your knee. And just like how your biceps help you flex your arm, your biceps femoris helps you flex your leg. So we can think of the back of your leg sort of like the front of your arm, where your biceps help you flex it, and on the back of your arm you have triceps, and on the front of your leg you have quadriceps. Both of those help you straighten those limbs out. So the quadriceps all help you straighten your leg and raise it, and your hamstrings help you flex your leg and raise it to the back. Here are the muscles of the leg from the front we've been talking about. I'm going to go ahead and draw them in for you on this in a time lapse like on your charts. So I'm just going to go from origin to insertion and follow the direction of the muscle fiber. So sartorius goes from pelvis down to the tibia on the side there. Vastus lateralis, biggest quadricep, and it goes from femur down patellar ligament to the tibia. The Rectus Femoris, which goes from the pelvis down to the patellar ligament to the tibia. And then the last of the quadriceps we're drawing, which is the Vastus Medialis, which goes from femur down to the front of the tibia. So I also added in the adductor longus and the gracilis. Looking at the back of the leg, we're going to do the same thing, go from origin to insertion. Mostly the hamstrings are what I'm worried about back here, although the Vastus lateralis I see a little bit of, so we'll throw it in there a little bit. It wraps around to the front, so from the back, it goes kind of behind your hamstring. So we'll start with your hamstring on the inside, and it goes from your pelvis down to your tibia, and that's your semitendinosus, and your biceps femoris, which go from your pelvis and also from your femur, bi means two, down to your fibula. So not as much from the back, and they kind of grip the back of your knee like ice tongs, which I'll talk about in a second. In terms of a big, simple shape, the upper leg is pretty much a cylinder that tapers towards the knee, which makes it a simple shape to understand and get basically right out of your head. So if we look closely at this Prudhomme drawing, we see he's basically treated the upper leg like a cylinder, and the quadriceps tapering down through the patellar ligament to the tibia. You can see the kneecaps where he put the highlight, and his careful cross-contouring really carves out all the muscles beautifully. So if we look at the upper leg, so here's a couple of legs. One of the things we notice once we get past the initial cylinder shape of the upper leg is which angle's higher, which angle's lower. So your outside quadricep is higher, and your inside one is lower and a little steeper. And by steeper, I mean your inside quadricep, your vastus medialis, turns a corner a little faster, like if you're driving a car and you turn the corner quicker. So outside higher, inside lower, both on the upper and lower leg. Here are some Italian drawings. Michelangelo on the left. You can see that leg on the left of the Michelangelo drawing. He started it very light, which is important to see. Good approach. And in the middle of Da Vinci leg, on the right, Da Vinci body. And the Da Vinci one in the middle, we see the same things we were talking about. Outside curve, higher and slower. Inside curve, lower and steeper. Both for the upper and lower leg for the front. So I want to look at the back of the leg and talk to you about the hamstrings for a second, and a couple of things about drawing the hamstrings. So if we look at the back of this Da Vinci drawing, you'll notice the hamstrings don't run exactly at the angle of the overall leg. They're at a slight angle. So from the back on the left leg, we would turn it a little bit in towards the top. Also, your hamstrings where they grip the knee are sort of like ice tongs. If you think of them from the side, where they go to the sides of the knee, I'll put it on the drawing too, just so you can see. See, the back of the knee is like the piece of ice, and the hamstrings are like tongs holding it. A couple more drawings. This one on the left is by Titian, and a really important thing is he's using his anatomy to reinforce the action and show you what the figure is doing. So this figure is lunging forward, so the quadriceps on that front leg are in high relief, very flexed. The quadriceps and muscles in general on the left leg, the back leg, are more relaxed. So he's using anatomy to show and reinforce rather than to show you how much he knows about anatomy. He's using it to show you what the figure is doing. So if we look at this Da Vinci drawing on the right, looks like he's doing some comparative anatomy with a dog leg, which is interesting. And I want to point out something I think worth noting about the curves on the leg from the side and where they're more prominent. I put some little red marks there So you can see as you go down the leg, the glutes more prominent at the back, and then it goes to the front for the quadriceps being more prominent, and then again to the back of the leg for the gastrocnemius, your calf muscle being more prominent. So it's kind of like a figure 8 coming down the side of the leg. So glutes from the back, quadriceps from the front, and gastroc from the back again. And lastly, these are from the Barg book, which was a book that was meant to be copied. And you see on both of these legs, he's got the structure laid out, and then the plane break where the leg goes from light to dark, and then renders it out. And you see he's also looking for plumb lines, those vertical and horizontal lines, to see where the balance is and check his angles. So that's a good, sensible way to build up a drawing. So he makes a careful map and measures, figure out where the dark and lights are going, and then renders it up. There's a Watteau drawing with nice tapered cylinder of the upper leg. Anyway, I hope this is useful for you and helps you draw those legs.